Folks, I'm Doug Page, and today I'm speaking with Jonna Mendez, author of a new book entitled In True Face, which details much of her 27-year career with the Central Intelligence Agency. If her last name sounds familiar, it's because her late husband is Tony Mendez. He, with help from Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor and his staff in Tehran, extricated 6 U.S. Embassy staffers in 1980, a significant victory for both the United States and Canada, while 52 members of the U.S. Embassy staff were held hostage there. The event became the focus of the movie Argo. Tony was portrayed by Academy Award-winning actor Ben Affleck. It should also be known that Ms. Mendez had her own distinguished career at the CIA, which included going undercover and many tours of duty overseas. In True Face is her 4th book. She and Tony co-authored 3 other books, Argo, The Moscow Rules, and Spy Dust. The last 2 are about intelligence breakthroughs that helped the United States win the Cold War against the Soviet Union. Ms. Mendez, thank you so very much for being here today.
I'm glad to be here talking to you. I'm looking forward to it.
Super. You had a very successful career at the CIA, rising from what was considered what you called a contract wife, performing many secretarial duties, to chief of disguise. What was the impetus for this book?
COVID. I was home alone. We lost Tony in '91, and I was kind of at loose ends. I didn't know what to do with all that time. You can only do so many jigsaw puzzles and crosswords. So I just started making notes, turned into a couple of chapters, turned into a book, and here I am. It's a long time writing this book, actually. I thought it would be much faster and easier. It turns out when I left CIA, I left everything behind. You don't bring any paper out when you come out with a little bag in your purse. So I had to research my own life to put this back together. When did that happen? What was that date? Who was with me? It was fun writing it. It's actually a lot of fun right now talking about it.
Oh, super! That's great. When you reflect on your career at the CIA, how do you see it? Can you sum it up in a word or a few sentences? How would you look at it?
The way I feel about it is that both Tony and I, we were truly immersed in the work we were doing. It was hard to leave. In our office, a lot of people, mostly men, the office was mostly men. When they left, the average lifespan was 18 months. They would have heart attacks. They didn't have a life outside of CIA. Their friends and everything they cared about was inside. Tony and I had 2 very, very active lives outside, so we survived that. But we left CIA, but we didn't leave espionage. We started working with the International Spy Museum when they were building it. We started teaching classes at the various other intelligence community organizations in DC. We have stayed in touch with the subject throughout the years.
Gotcha.
And
I'm sorry. It might sound like a dumb question, but I get paid to ask dumb questions, so I'm going to ask it anyway. But there's a good chance that many people just don't know what the value of the CIA is. It comes up in headlines from time to time, but they really don't understand the value of the work. Can you just describe, obviously without giving away any secrets, what the value is that the CIA brings to the United States?
Well, it's true, and what we do in silence, and we do it behind the scenes. But the job of the CIA is to discern the plans and intentions of the enemies of this country, whoever they are. What are they going to do? When are they going to do it? Get the information, the ground truth, bring it back to the policymakers so they have something to work with when they're making decisions that affect us all. That all happens kind of behind a smoke screen. It's not visible. We send briefers to the White House every single morning with the president's daily brief. These are the hot spots. This is what's going on. This is what's coming behind it. These are our concerns. And then they start their work of directing our government and making decisions that impact us all. It's part of the machine that runs the government. And without the information, what are they going to do next? What's going to happen in Ukraine? What is Putin thinking about? What about those rockets in North Korea? What about the nuclear program that's gearing up over here? Where is it? Without that kind of hard information, it makes it hard to make a plan to move forward.
And sometimes agents are putting their lives very much at risk, and sometimes the consequences aren't so good for them too.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. You know, you mentioned the book, The Moscow Rules, and um, Tony and I wrote that together. The Moscow Rules were rules of comportment if you were operating in Moscow. We just added one last rule maybe 4 years ago. The last rule is never fall in love with your agent. It didn't mean romantic love. It meant don't get too close to them, because these are personal relationships. They're counting on you to protect them. And we are doing everything we can to keep them safe. And even then, we still lose some. They get arrested. They get executed. We lost one. It was so tragic. Everyone who worked with that man loved him, and we added the last rule when they arrested him. They were forcing him to write a confession. He said, I'll write the confession, but I want to do it with my own pen. They brought him his pen. He's at a desk. He takes it out of the case, puts it in his mouth, bit down in the end of his pen, where we had embedded it's called an L pill. It's a cyanide pill. He said when he started working for us, I'll work for you with a condition. You have to give me a way to take my own life if they arrest me. And initially, you might be interested to know, the CIA said, no, we won't do that. We don't do that. He said, fine, I won't work for you. I won't do that. And we caved. We gave him a pen. We never really thought he'd have to use it, but he did. He was Russian, and the Soviets had put a rumor out, but it was a very powerful rumor, that if they caught any of their fellow countrymen betraying the motherland, they were going to, after the trial, they were going to put them into a crematorium, feet first, alive. The idea being to discourage any of their fellow countrymen from, working with the West. But people believed that. And I don't know, it may have been true. He believed it. That's why he wanted the cyanide pill, and that's why he took it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, without question, a brave man. You talk about in your book, which is a bit biographical, obviously, about the work environment that was like that you entered into. And what were the differences between the work environment that you entered into and by the time that you retired from the CIA? How much had the organization changed?
A number. It was about women. The organization was primarily men when I came in. We worked for the men. We were basically clerical. We were secretarial. Jean Vertefeuille, she's the person that helped identify Aldrich James, the traitor within our midst. Mm-hmm. She was the one who found him. She came in with a college degree and language capabilities, and they hired her as a typist in the secretarial pool originally. Women rose up. Jean Vertefeuille ended up being a chief of station in Africa. Women found their way, like I found my way, out of that category and into professional occupations. It's still not anywhere near an equivalency, but it is improved. It is.
But one of the things that many might know about the CIA and perhaps its forerunner, the OSS, is that there were women who made serious contributions. You mentioned one, Eloise Page. What made her stand out?
Well, Eloise was my role model. She was Bill Donovan's administrative assistant when they founded the OSS at the very, very beginning. And that the war was still going on. Eloise ended up not just stepping out of the secretarial thing, but she ended up in Europe at the end of World War II, chasing Nazis and seeing to their arrest and seeing that they were properly incarcerated. She was a ball of fire. She also ended up being our first female chief of station. She had an amazing career. I think starting out at the very, very tippy top of the CIA didn't hurt her career track at all. But I don't mean to imply that she wasn't a terribly capable woman. She was, and a lot of us follow her. But when I was, as I was rising up and doing some teaching within the agency, the women in CIA had never heard of Eloise Page. It was, no one knew who she was, and that has changed now. She's been brought forward as a role model to all of them and all of us. But her name was not on some wall or there was no portrait of there was nothing. She was just She was just a name.
Sure. What about Virginia Hall and her exploits during World War II?
Virginia Hall, she was another amazing woman. It's a long story, but she was local to Washington, D.C. She came from just outside of D.C. in Maryland. She ended up in Europe. She had languages. She came from a well-to-do family. She had an accident at some point where she lost a leg. She was on a horse she was hunting. She had a gun. They went over a fence. She lost her leg. She applied to the CIA and they would not hire her without a leg. So she went to work for the Brits, the SOE. They hired her, and she not only went to work for them, but they dropped her behind the lines into occupied Germany. And there's Eloise Page. Now I say she lost her leg. She lost it below the knee. She had a wooden, back then, a very, I think, very coarse artificial leg. So she was known to the Germans. They realized that she was up to no good. She was known as the lady that limps. She and a radio operator, they had to move every day. They had to broadcast out of barns, out of all kinds of obscure buildings. The Germans were out there with their direction finding equipment, trying to locate that radio. Being a radio operator back then was like the most dangerous job you had, because they would find you. She was a heroine. She was going out to London with radio. They were flying in supplies to the resistance. She was identifying bridges and railroad ties that they were bombing them. She was just wrecking hell all through southern France during that time. She ended up, at the end of the day, she came back to the United States, and the CIA did hire her. And so they gave her a desk job, and she hated it. She was not put out for a desk job at all. But she's celebrated at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. as one of the women. I mean, most people had not heard of her. They are going to hear about her. I think there are a total of 3 books about her that are out now. And I think the Spy Museum is getting ready to take the exhibit about her and improve it and enhance it. But she's a woman that needs to be better known.
Sure. Did their actions, I mean, from Eloise and Virginia, did it change any of the thinking at the CIA about what women could do for the agency?
Changed mine.
Yeah, changed yours.
The men knew about them. If you ask the men who were of Eloise's generation and worked with her, they would say that old battle axe. Said to me when I asked, did you know her personally? That old battle axe. She was fierce, and what might be considered commendable in a man who's in authority was considered, not becoming of a woman who was in a position of authority. So those kinds of nuanced opinions, I think, have shifted considerably. And I would point out that in the upper levels of the CIA, women rule. Gina Haspel wasn't one of a kind. There are a group of women at the top tier of CIA that have and continue to do wonderful jobs of guiding that organization. It's a little further down, and especially in the operational area, that women have had so much resistance. And that's the part that I was in.
Right. You mentioned in your book too as well the operation, I guess it was in Afghanistan recently, where at least one agent was killed, maybe 2 were killed, and they were both women, right? There was a meeting where I believe it was in Afghanistan, where the terrorists came up driving in a car, got out, and then basically blew themselves up, and they were there along the way.
That's not in front of my mind at the moment, but there are always these terrible stories that come out of that part of the world. If you think women are devalued at the CIA, women in those societies are meaningless almost. They don't have any value whatsoever.
Sure. You described the section where you worked, the Office of Technical Services, as having an entrenched misogyny. Was this all over the CIA or just in your particular section, as you understood it?
What I found in OTS, in the queue of CIA, was a large group of very, very capable men doing their work. most of them with technical credentials, because that was our that was the entree into our office. They were physicists, chemists, electrical, mechanical engineers, people with such narrow specialties that I'm not sure what they would have done had we not hired them. We had a man who did hot air balloons. We had someone else who did nothing but ink. It sounds ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. It was absolutely necessary. Tony Mendez, my husband, came in as a counterfeiter forger. You know, we had those kinds of skills. A lot of women didn't come in with those kinds of skills. That didn't mean that you couldn't find yourself a place. So the people that I worked with initially, they all kind of had an RIT background. They came out of a Kodak heavy background. They knew everything about the chemistry of 1,000 different films. But at the end of the day, they'd come in with an unknown film that was suspicious, and they needed to see it, and they had to give it to someone to develop. They would give it to me. I never went to RIT, but they knew that I would cut off tiny pieces of it and develop each tiny piece till we found what it was, and then develop the whole thing. What I didn't have in terms of a degree, I think I made up for in just being fastidious in the work.
Sure.
I didn't even know that they could trust me.
You know, you mentioned it's probably hard for many people to believe, but you know, many years ago, pictures used to be developed in a thing called a dark room.
Oh yeah, I was the queen of the dark room.
Queen of the dark room seems like an antiquated room or an antiquated term these days, doesn't it? But you mentioned, you know, seeing nude pictures on one of the walls in the dark room at the CIA, and then you said you went off there and you pulled them down. Can you just describe your emotions and what you were thinking and how you felt after that?
I had been up to that point. I had been trying to be one of the guys, thinking that maybe that's the way forward. If they just treat me like another, you know, and not make any concessions to the fact that I'm a woman, that didn't really work. I ended up. I had worked there for some time, and those pictures had been up on the wall in the dark rooms, and I just got sick of it, and I just took them all down, put them in the trash. The men never said a word to me about it. No one ever said, "Hey, where'd Hilda go?" Hilda being the favorite. Where's Hilda? No one said a word. They were like, "Okay."
So did you see as a result of what you did you see a change in behavior or attitude or anything like that from the men that you were working alongside?
You know, you would build respect when they discovered that you could do what they could do, and actually you could do it just as well, and that they could trust you with just about anything that came in. And if you didn't understand it, you'd ask the question. When you got to that level, there was a certain equality in how you were managed. And I got to that level. It was like, as long if you can do it, they would let you do it. And then if you ask, well, let's do a little more. Can I do that? Okay. Now I'm out of the dark room. Well, what if I go out and meet with that agent and teach him how to do that thing? They say, okay, yeah, because, well, first of all, there's nobody else here. You go do that. I did that real well. And then I did it again. And pretty soon I was doing what they were doing, which means I was traveling all over the place and training people, and I was doing their work.
Gotcha.
And they did it at that point, but not until I elbowed my way into it.
Gotcha.
There was no reaching out to me like, come on in. You had to push your way in, actually.
Sure. You know, you talk about in your book too as well that, you know, sometimes waking up at home in the morning, not knowing if you're going to be going to bed there that night. How unsettling is this?
I loved it. I loved it. There's one secret to all of it. When I talk to women, or when I talk to a lot of young people that come to Washington, D.C. every summer, and they say, "How did you do that with kids?" And I tell them, I didn't have children. That wasn't an issue. And you can see these young women thinking, yeah, you know, well, that would be a catch. With children, you'd have a different dynamic, and you'd either figure out how to make it work, or perhaps that wouldn't be the career for you.
Right. Given all your travel, did you ever find it wearing or look upon any particular destination with just drudgery?
look on it, a destination
With
as
just drudgery, like someplace you really didn't want to be.
not really. There was I kind of could always find something that I liked about just about anywhere. There was a city that was hard to find that place. That was Dhaka, Bangladesh. There's not a lot there to hang on to say, oh, I want to go back there. I want to do it again. It was bleak. It may not be like that now, but it was a bleak place. In the book, I think I wrote that they had these vehicles, these rickshaw kind of vehicles, and they had bells on the front because there was nothing electrical on them at all. And in the back, they had lights, and they were candles in glass. So to watch a group of them go by at night, it was like butterflies, and the bells would ring, and you'd see the lights. It was kind of beautiful, and that's about as good as it got in Dhaka, to see a group of them on the road.
What was it like to live incognito under an alias? So you must have to memorize your own background, who you are, so you can tell a good story in case somebody's asking you a question. What was it like to go through that experience?
It changed a lot because you didn't always have the same name, and you didn't always have the same story. And so you just developed a group of habits that no matter who you were, it would work. And that was like on an airplane, you never declared yourself. If somebody said, "Where do you work?" You would just turn it back to them. You would say, "Oh, you wouldn't believe how far I'd drive to get where I work. Where do you work?" So if you're talking to a heart surgeon, you don't want to be telling him that you're a heart surgeon too. If you're talking to somebody from the Pentagon, you don't want to be claiming to be at the Pentagon, because they'll say, what lot do you park in? What cafeteria do you eat in? And you just get lost in your lies. So you always start out. So who are you? It forces you almost to be friendly. Who are you, and where do you work, and what do you do? And then you can, on an airplane or in a social scenario, you can fashion something that they would have no clue about. But then you would always have identities that had accompanying paperwork, maybe some documentation, and you'd be able to talk about that in some depth. I'll tell you a funny story. We had a new neighbor in Virginia, moved in. We took a cake over or something. We had drinks with them. I said to him, "Where do you work?" He said, "I'm at the Pentagon." And I'm thinking, okay, let's see. So I'm not at the Pentagon. So I came up with something. This was going to be a neighbor. This was going to be long lasting. And it wasn't, it was a week and a half later. I'm at the CIA at some special briefing. We have a big bubble, big auditorium, this guy on the stage. And I'm settling into my chair, and I lean forward and look down the row, and there's my new neighbor. He's 8 people down. We just waved. It was like, oh, hello. You never knew. It was tricky.
Right. You never knew. Exactly. You talked about the career development program and the hand grenade. Can you just describe that, what happened there, and what it was like to go through that situation?
That was an elite program to be in. There were 8 of us, 6 men and two women. I was one of the women. They taught us so many different things, but the story in the book is we were at a military training facility, learning how to do some paramilitary things. And 2 of the people in the course, they were CIA employees coming out of a military background. So they knew a lot about weapons. They knew a lot about weaponry, about explosives, about ammunition. And we were on a firing range, and they were teaching us, they were showing us how simple it is to make a bomb. Like if you're a terrorist, you go to Home Depot and buy a little plastic soap container and get some fertilizer and 3 ingredients, and you've got a bomb. And then we'd blow up a truck, and we'd see what you could do with that bomb. And it was, part of it was fun, part of it was scary. But working around that kind of live ammunition had a certain protocol that you would never break. You never smoke when you were close to that stuff. You would never even have matches in your pocket. It was so serious. Anyway, I got promoted while we were there. The boss flew to that base where I was to tell me I was promoted. I had dinner with the boss. This one guy in that class was not happy because he was not promoted. And he was just watching, and he thought I was, they were showing favoritism to me. And he said something, and he was sitting with some Navy SEALs, and I walked up to him, and he said something, and my bad, I poured a beer on him, part of a beer, just part of a beer on him, sitting in his bar with a bunch of Navy SEALs. And I guess I just really, really, really needed him that. So the next day on the range, we were on the range, and I heard this voice. It was him. He said, "Hey, Jonna." And I turned around and looked, and he had a grenade, and he rolled it. And they roll kind of like a football. They don't roll straight. They zigzag, but here it came. And I thought, oh, he wants me to run. He's just trying to embarrass me. I embarrassed him. So I decided not to run, and I just stood there, and the thing rolled and got fairly close. And I, well, and it went off. Now, he had taken out any shrapnel, this could not hurt me. When he let go of it, he knew it couldn't hurt me, but it scared me to death. That thing, when it went off, it was concussive, that sound. And it just really scared me. I couldn't stop. And I put in the book because it was such a moment. I couldn't believe that he did that. And I thought, would he do that to one of his male friends? No, he would not. He did it because he wanted to see me run or cry or something. Anyway, he apologized the next day and said he was sorry. And I said, "That's okay. I forgive you," but I never forgave him. And I saw him recently. And he's forgotten this. I know, because he came up and gave me a big hug and told me how good it was to see me. And I'm looking at him like, I don't remember that. It's just front of mind for me.
A bit surprising.
Yeah.
You also mentioned a training program that prepared you for a hostile interrogation where you're the prisoner and you're being subjected to some pretty harsh treatment. What was the biggest takeaway about yourself as you came through that training exercise?
I talk about it was a 3-day training course. They put us through the most severe training scenario that they can imagine, including taking everything away from us and no sleep and constant sound and constant light and hostile interrogation from military people that they brought in to see if they couldn't punch a little hole in this CIA facade that we were showing up with. It was a very, very tough course. And on about day 2, you almost forgot that it was a training course, and you felt like, oh my God, can I last another day in here? It was hard. The thing I took away was something we had some POWs from Vietnam come in and talk to us at the beginning of that class, talking about when they were taken hostage, how they dealt with long-term, stress. And one of them who reminded me of John McCain, he said everybody had a project. Some played chess, some rebuilt the engines of the cars in their heads. Some people built houses. He said, I could just leave that confining place I was and go somewhere in my head. He said, if you're in enough trouble, you can do that. So they put me in a box, like a mattress box, where you couldn't turn at all. It must have been like 8 inches deep. You could go in sideways and come out sideways. And they closed the door. Oh, and I had told them that I'm claustrophobic. That's why they put me in that box. I am claustrophobic. And I was in there and I thought, can't stay in here. This is not going to work. I'm going to have to. How will I tell them that I need to leave the course? And then I remembered that man, and I started thinking, okay, if I could be somewhere, where would I be? What would be a really good place to be? And it took me back to Kansas, where I had come from. That's where I grew up. It was the place I spent my teenage years trying to escape, because I hated Kansas. And there I am in this stupid box. In a training facility in Virginia, and the escape is to get back into the tall grass prairie of Kansas. And it got me through that exercise into the next day. And I came out of that course. 2 men they took out of that course before it was over. I mean, it was an excruciating experience. 2 of the guys couldn't. I don't even know which 2 guys, because of course I didn't see them. I had a bag over my head the whole time. I didn't see anybody. That was the last time they ran that course, by the way. They shut it down afterwards. No more of that. Yeah.
You talk about how your husband Tony got the idea for the masks so agents could be even that much more incognito when they're overseas. And what's interesting was that, he gets the idea from watching a very popular movie, Planet of the Apes. Uh, it would seem that few would believe that such an idea would come from such a movie, perhaps, or even out of fiction, but maybe not. But any idea about how this idea was initially received by the people at the CIA when he pitched it?
He became a personal friend of John Chambers, who was the makeup artist, the Oscar-winning makeup artist that made those masks. He also made Dr. Spock's ears. Tony was an artist, so Tony's very interested in this creative process. We were already using stunt double masks at CIA from Hollywood, like Brad Pitt or these well-known movie stars. They were making masks so they could have stunt people, right off on the horse instead of hurting Brad Pitt. So we were using Hollywood as a model when we were making those masks. Our best mask was actually Rex Harrison. We had an aluminum mold of Rex Harrison's face, and we could produce these latex blank masks that we could turn them into anything, any ethnicity, anything we wanted. We could make them dark, we could make them light, we could make them male or female. A female Rex Harrison mask is a scary, scary thing to see, but there was a place where it would work. Rex Harrison never knew, by the way, that we were exporting them all over the world. There was a use for them in car meetings. You had to keep a distance, but there was a use for them. And as we started refining the masks, that just the fact that they were refined, you could get closer and closer. You could actually have close encounters with people. They proved useful in many ways. At the end of the day, when we made the full face animated masks, we turned that into a scenario where we could make another version of you. We could have, you and your blue shirt and your tie and your brown hair and your glasses. And we could take someone of a similar size and weight and stature and put your face on person number 2, put him in a blue shirt and a tie and brown hair. And then we could do what magicians do. And we could play with having 2 people instead of 1. We could disappear one can appear. It gave us enormous flexibility when we were working against surveillance teams, because they thought they had you the whole time. They thought you never left their sight, when maybe you left their sight at the very beginning of the day, and it was your imposter that they were following through the day, being very comfortable going back to their headquarters saying, yeah, boss, we got him. We've had him in our sight all day. He hasn't done a thing. And our guy is over there doing many things. So because it was so useful, they didn't mind paying the bill. Sure. They got a lot of bang for buck with those masks.
You also mentioned, though, that in certain cases that, if you're going to wear one of these masks, that you need to be a bit of an actor too as well. How hard is that to pull off? If you've got to do, it seems like the agents would need, beyond just doing their job, some extra skills that perhaps are not necessarily intuitive. But you tell me.
With all of the disguise materials, but the more advanced the disguises were, the more you needed to exercise the mask. You needed to wear it in public. You needed to, because you get a little paranoid. You get out there and wearing, whether even wigs and mustaches, and you think people are going to look at you funny. And so whatever kind of disguise we gave people, we insisted that they wear it in public. If we were away from headquarters, we'd say, go to 7-Eleven, go to CVS, buy me something, bring it back, wear the disguise while you do it. If we were in the headquarters building, we'd get them all for a final fitting, and we'd send them to the cafeteria to have lunch, where all of their colleagues, all of their friends, their boss, everybody was there. They'd go down to the cafeteria, spend an hour having lunch, come back and say, yeah, it really, really, really works well. No one.
So of course. So you'd be wearing the masks around your colleagues who should know who you are, and suddenly you're completely incognito. Am I correct about that?
We didn't do that with the colleagues with the mask, because we didn't want you smoking, drinking, or eating with that mask.
Okay.
So we'd send you out on an errand somewhere, okay, to give you the experience, what it feels like to wear one of those in public. What's it like to drive with the mask? Because there's a certain, you have to turn your head more than you do if you don't have the thing on. You had to accommodate your, whatever it was we gave you. And we had to make sure to do that.
Sure. You become the chief of disguise.
Mm.
What sort of pressure did you feel in that position?
I was elated. First, I didn't want the job. Then I was elated to get the job. Then it became a kind of a different ball game. It was about going into finance meetings and battling for money and battling for slots and kinds of things that I had tried to avoid for a lot of my career. Taking care of your employees, making sure that they were getting the training. That was a whole new piece of the work that was never something I had aspired to. I did it. I think I did it well. I had an amazingly good team, but part of me wanted to be back out overseas, doing the work, meeting with people, making a difference in that way, not in the bureaucratic way, but hands-on. I never got over that. That's where my heart was the whole time.
You, what was it like to go to the Oval Office and meet President George H.W. Bush?
It was really interesting. I went with the head of CIA, Judge Webster, who was very enthusiastic about this mask. Initially, they wanted me to go as an African-American man. That was the first mask that I showed them. I put on a man's suit, put on a mask, put on gloves, met the director of my office. Then we went and met the director of CIA, and they said, "Oh my God, we have to go to the White House and show this to George H.W. Bush." I said, "I don't have any identification. Shall we make something?" He said, "Oh, you won't, no, you're with me. You won't need any ID to get through the Secret Service." So we thought about it and thought still the Secret Service might, if they wanted to talk to me for a minute, and I don't really have a man's voice, they said, "Well, we'll have you go as a woman, a different woman, wear a female mask. It'll make the same impact." So we did that. It was very smooth. We went into the office. I was going to be the first one to brief the president that morning, and then I was going to leave because I didn't need to hear the rest of the presidential daily brief and all. So there was a horseshoe of people. I was here, the first one, Judge Webster, the head of CIA. John Sununu was to my left, Bob Gates, and Brent Scowcroft. These are all wonderful names. Dan Quayle was he wasn't there. He showed up at the very end of the meeting when it was over. So I told the president, who had been at one time the director of CIA, I said, "I brought you some photos. Here's you in disguise. Remember these?" And he's going through these big glossy 8x10s. And it's like, oh, that was so good. He's enjoying that. And I said, "So I'm here to show you what we're doing now. It's quite different from what we did with you." I said, "So I'm going to show you this latest disguise." I said, I'm going to remove it and show it to you." And he said, "Oh, don't remove it. Hold on." And he got up and he walks over and he's walking around me and he doesn't know what I'm wearing. He doesn't know it's a mask. I think maybe he thought, a nose? I don't know what he was looking for. He's looking for a seam. He was looking for an edge, right? Or whatever it was. He couldn't see it. So he said, "Okay, take it off." So I did that. And I was holding it up in the air for him to see. And it was very, very cool. John Sununu, this is my favorite part of the story. Sununu hadn't been paying any attention. I've been talking. He had a little pad. He was making notes because he was going to talk next. He was thinking about what he was going to say. And I remember at one point he was scratching out what he had written, putting something else in, a little bitty writing. But when I took off the mask, I heard this little squeak come from him because he was startled. He looked up and I'm holding, it looks like a decapitated person in my hand. And he was really surprised at that. The president loved it. There was a photographer in the room. She took a picture. She took a bunch of pictures. You could hear the shutter. So I was the first to brief, and then I was the first to leave. I'm in the outer office. The photographer came out behind me, and she said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I know you were." I said, "I heard you took pictures, right?" She said, "Oh yeah, I took pictures. This is film. She can't see her pictures." She said, "Yeah, but what was that?" And I said, "Oh, I can't tell you. It's classified." So I didn't get the picture for 10 years. I don't know if it was her fault or what, but when I got it, someone had airbrushed the mask out of my hand. So it's me sitting in front of the president's desk with my hand in the air, my finger pointing at him. She left a finger in, and it's just a very odd picture. So I have it in my library, and people come in and they look at it and they say, what were you saying to him? It looks like I'm lecturing him. And I can't tell you, it was classified. I'm sorry, it was classified what I was saying. And then everybody laughs.
Sure.
That's the president really liked it.
Sure. You know, you mentioned in your book about how your admiration for the United States grows. What brings this about?
Well, initially, you know, you read the book. I went to Europe, and I was blown away by Germany's reconstruction, by France and their wonderful history and their wonderful food and wine. Everywhere I went, it was another really positive discovery. And then you start noticing things like, oh, the phones don't work over there like they do in America. These things we take, these little things we take for granted. It's a big deal. I ended up in India for a while, one of the great democracies in the world, comparing their democracy to our democracy, thinking, you know, I think ours wins. The longer I was overseas, the more I appreciate the country that I came from in a way that I'd never appreciated before I left. It was just the backdrop to my life when I left. It's where I was from. And by the time I came home, well, it was 23 years till I came home for good. It just makes you love this country more than you did at the beginning. It was a very, very positive experience.
Sure. You become a mom at 47. What is more challenging, working in intelligence or being a mom?
I don't know. My son is sitting at the end of this room, and I'm not sure how to compare them. I'm not sure that I can compare them. It was another challenge. It was another new beginning. I had done many new beginnings. I was up for that one. Thing was, I thought we were finished with espionage. Tony had retired. He was painting. I retired when Jesse was 4 months old. I started doing fine art photography. We had a big art gallery. We had huge shows twice a year. We were doing art. And then here came espionage sneaking around the corner. They opened the International Spy Museum in DC. We were founding board members. We worked for 3 years before it opened, helping them organize what it would be. We started teaching to the various intelligence agencies, some courses. Then here came Argo, the movie. We had to write the book to make sure that people that saw the movie understood that actually they hadn't chased the airplane down the runway at the end in Jeeps. And then more books followed. So it just kept, and it continues. It's like we're stuck in this espionage world. It's not a bad place to be stuck. I like it.
Let me two last questions. Here's the first one. In your book, you quote Ralph Waldo Emerson, do not go where the path may lead, go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. How does that apply to you and your career in the CIA?
I think what I was doing was a little unusual. I wasn't the only one, wasn't the only woman trying to push my way forward and make a new path. I wasn't thinking so much of women in the plural at that time. I was just bemoaning the fact that there wasn't an open track for me, that all I had to do was get on the track and I would have success. I was laying a new trail. I was. Eloise Page did it. There have been others, but I was very aware of the fact that it was uncommon what I wanted to do and what I ended up doing. That maybe made it a little sweeter. I'm not sure, but sure like doing it.
Good for you. And then could you just give us some details about the International Spy Museum, where it's located in Washington, D.C., and what the hours are too as well? I'm sure the viewers would like to know more about it.
It's really a stunning museum. It's in L'Enfant Plaza. It's kind of a historic space in D.C. It's on the other side of the mall. There is an effort in D.C. by the mayor to push the tourism thing in that direction because there's room over there. The old part of DC is getting a little crowded. The museum is open 7 days a week. I can't tell you specifically the hours right now. It's kind of seasonal, but it's an amazing museum to visit. It's hard to do it all at one time. We find people tend to come back the second time. Right now, there's a special exhibit of James Bond's cars, and so they have craned in 17 of the cars from the James Bond movies, the Aston Martins, all of them. There's a plane in there. There's all of the vehicles that he was part of. It's an exhibit that'll be there for a year. But basically, in the museum, it's broken down into a bunch of different categories. Tony Mendez has a big exhibit space in there. That whole Argo operation is memorialized along one wall. I'm in a little glass case. So is that mask that there's a picture of the mask in the book, and a can of Dr. Scholl's foot powder is in glass case with me with no label. It's a little joke. I keep telling them, you've got to put a label and explain what that is, because it's just odd to have it on a glass shelf without a clue what it is. It's the museum gets rave reviews, and it's not on the mall. We broke the mold when we built the museum. We took it off the mall. There's a charge for admission. I think it's like $12 for a ticket. It kind of goes against the grain of the Smithsonian's and a lot of other big museums in DC, but it's wildly successful. It's you can look at it on TripAdvisor. You can any way you want to look at it. You can see that people really enjoy going. Right. We were honored to be part of it.
Oh, super good for you. Well, Jonna, thank you so very much for all of your time today. I'm so grateful that we could do this interview with you. It was a pleasure, and if it presents itself again, I certainly hope you will come back too as well.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you.